The sun was shining brightly that afternoon, and the neighborhood park buzzed with laughter and chatter. Children ran between swings, parents watched from benches, and the smell of grilled corn floated through the air. Among them was a 14-year-old boy named Marcus Harris who had come to the park with a couple of his school friends after finishing his homework. He wore a plain red t-shirt, his favorite sneakers, and carried the kind of energy only a hopeful teenager could have. Innocent, restless, and full of dreams. Marcus was the kind of boy who liked to stay out of trouble. His teachers described him as polite and intelligent, always willing to help. He was the type of student who picked up others' books when they fell, who smiled even when people ignored him. That day, he had no idea his quiet afternoon would become a moment that would change not just his life, but an entire city's outlook on justice. Across the park, Officer Bradley Knox was patrolling in his blue uniform. He had been with the force for 8 years, but his reputation wasn't built on kindness. He was quick to assume, quicker to act, and even quicker to judge. He carried himself like a man who wanted control, not peace. To him, order came through fear, not understanding. When he saw a small group of kids laughing near the playground, he narrowed his eyes. Just moments earlier, a woman had reported that her phone had gone missing near the benches. She hadn't accused anyone directly, but Bradley immediately spotted Marcus and his friends as his prime suspects. To him, they looked suspicious. That single word in his mind was enough. He walked toward them, his boots crunching against the gravel path. The laughter of the children faded when they saw his expression. Marcus turned, puzzled. He wasn't used to seeing anger in a stranger's eyes directed at him. "Hey, you!" Bradley said sharply, pointing a finger. "You kids hanging around here, you see a phone lying around?" Marcus looked at his friends, then back at the officer. "No, sir," he replied softly. "We didn't see any phone." Bradley stepped closer, his voice rising. "Don't lie to me, kid. I've been watching you and your little gang walking around with your hands in your pockets. Empty them." The park went quiet. Parents looked up. Some whispered. Marcus hesitated, not because he had anything to hide, but because he was embarrassed. His friends slowly backed away, afraid of saying the wrong thing. "I don't have anything, sir," Marcus said again, pulling his pockets inside out. His hands trembled slightly. Out fell a few coins, a piece of gum, and a small folded note with his homework schedule. That was it, but Bradley wasn't convinced. "You think I'm stupid?" he barked. "I know your type. You come here to stir trouble, steal what you can, then act innocent." Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. He wanted to explain, to defend himself, but the officer's tone made it clear. Words would not help. His heart began to race. Around them, people watched silently, their eyes full of unease but their bodies frozen in fear of getting involved. "I didn't steal anything," Marcus said again, this time a little louder, a little braver. "We were just playing." Before he could finish, Bradley's hand shot out and grabbed his shoulder. The force made Marcus stumble forward. Gasps erupted from the onlookers. Bradley's voice turned cold. "Don't you talk back to me, boy." Marcus's eyes widened in disbelief. "I'm not—" The officer raised his hand and struck him across the face. The sound echoed. For a second, time stood still. The laughter of the park vanished completely. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. The sting burned on Marcus's cheek, but the pain wasn't what broke him. It was the humiliation, the shame, the disbelief that a grown man, a figure of authority, would hit him for simply being there. Bradley pointed a finger at him again, his words cutting like glass. "You better get out of here. You don't belong in this park. Ghetto trash." The phrase landed heavier than the slap. Marcus's vision blurred with tears, but he refused to let them fall. He clenched his jaw, trying to stand tall. His small hands balled into fists, not from anger, but from helplessness. He had never been called something like that before. Not in his school. Not in his home. It felt like the officer had stripped away his dignity in front of the entire world. Behind him, an older man in a dark blue police dress uniform stood silently near the edge of the crowd. His posture was straight, his expression unreadable, but his eyes burned with controlled fury. That man was Chief Daniel Harris, the newly appointed police chief, the first black man in the city to ever hold that position. Few people recognized him yet. It was only his third week in office. He had come to the park quietly that day to enjoy his day off, wearing his formal uniform after attending a community event. He hadn't expected to witness his own son being humiliated before his eyes. Daniel's chest tightened as he watched the scene unfold. Every fiber in his body screamed to step in to protect his son, but years of discipline told him to wait. He wanted to see how far the officer would go, to see the truth of what kind of prejudice was still breathing inside the department he had vowed to reform. Bradley, unaware of who stood behind him, continued. "Don't just stand there, I said leave," he shouted. His voice echoed through the trees. A little girl nearby began to cry, holding her mother's hand tightly. Some people took out their phones, recording quietly, afraid to intervene but unwilling to look away. Marcus took a shaky breath. "I didn't do anything wrong," he said, voice trembling but steady. "I didn't steal anything. You can search me, you can check my bag." "Shut your mouth," Bradley interrupted, stepping closer again. "You think you can talk to an officer like that?" Marcus flinched but did not back away this time. His heart pounded in his chest. He wanted to scream, to run, but a voice inside him, his father's voice, whispered, "Stand tall, even when they want you to bow." That was something Chief Harris had told him many times. "Respect everyone, Marcus, but never let anyone take away your dignity." Those words gave him strength now, even as tears burned at the corners of his eyes. Then, a deep voice cut through the tension. "That's enough, Officer Knox." Everyone turned. The officer froze, startled. His head snapped toward the voice, and when he saw who it belonged to, his blood ran cold. Chief Harris stepped forward slowly, his shoes crunching on the gravel. The sunlight caught the polished badge on his chest. Conversations in the crowd hushed to silence. Bradley's mouth opened slightly, trying to find words. Chief Harris, sir," he stammered. "I didn't realize." "Didn't realize what?" The chief's voice was calm, almost quiet, but it carried weight. "Didn't realize you were assaulting a child? Didn't realize that this child happens to be my son?" Bradley's face turned pale. The park collectively held its breath. Marcus's eyes widened in shock. He hadn't even known his father was there. "Sir, He looked suspicious, and the lady said her phone was—" "Enough," Chief Harris interrupted. He turned to the crowd. "Did anyone here see this boy steal anything?" A few voices spoke up immediately. "No, he didn't do anything. We saw the whole thing." Phones were raised higher now, recording every word. Chief Harris looked back at the officer, his voice controlled but firm. "You see, Officer Knox, there's something dangerous about power in the wrong hands. It doesn't just break rules, it breaks people." The officer swallowed hard. "Sir, please, But the chief raised a hand. "Save your excuses for the disciplinary board. You are suspended effective immediately." Gasps spread through the park. Bradley stood frozen, unable to speak. The chief turned to his son, his expression softening. "You okay, son?" Marcus nodded slowly, tears now rolling freely. "Yes, Dad." Chief Harris placed a hand on his shoulder and faced the onlookers. "This department will not tolerate abuse, not under my command. The badge is not a license to humiliate, it is a duty to protect." For the first time, the park erupted in quiet applause. Some people wiped their eyes, others nodded in respect. In that moment, Marcus saw his father not just as a police officer, but as a man of courage, fairness, and heart. As they walked away together, Marcus glanced back once. The same officer who had called him trash now stood silent, ashamed. It was a picture he would never forget, not because it was painful, but because it showed him the power of dignity and truth. He held his father's hand tightly as they left the park, unaware that this moment would soon make headlines, spark reform, and inspire thousands. But for now, all that mattered was this. Even when the world tried to break him, Marcus had chosen to stand tall, and that made him unshakable. The ride home from the park was quiet. The car moved slowly through the neighborhood streets, the sound of the tires on the road filling the silence between father and son. Marcus sat in the passenger seat staring out the window, his reflection showing a mixture of confusion, anger, and disbelief. His cheek was still red from the slap, but the real pain ran deeper. Chief Daniel Harris drove with both hands tight on the steering wheel. His uniform jacket was neatly folded beside him, but his thoughts were anything but orderly. Every few seconds he glanced at his son, his mind torn between rage and sorrow. The father in him wanted to pull over, hold Marcus, and promise that everything would be okay. But the police chief in him knew that the problem was bigger than one officer's mistake. When they reached home, Marcus rushed straight to his room without saying a word. Daniel followed slowly, his steps heavy. He knocked softly before entering. "Marcus," he said, his voice gentle, "look at me, son." Marcus turned, his eyes filled with tears he had tried to hide. "Dad," he whispered, "why did he hate me so much? I didn't even do anything." Daniel sat down beside him on the bed. For a moment he didn't answer. He stared at the floor, choosing his words carefully. "Son, there are people in this world who see what they want to see, not what's real. They don't see your heart, your kindness, your future. They only see what they've been taught to fear." Marcus frowned. "But you're a police chief. You wear the same uniform. Why would someone from your own department do that?" Daniel sighed deeply. "That's what hurts the most. The uniform is supposed to represent protection, not power. But sometimes people forget the difference. They let their fear and ego lead instead of their duty. That's why I became chief, to change that." Marcus wiped his eyes, his young face full of questions. "Do you think he'll get fired?" Daniel looked at him. "There will be consequences, but firing one man won't fix the system. The real change has to come from inside people's hearts." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I just want people to see me for who I am." Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. "And they will, Marcus. Today was ugly, but it also showed something powerful. You stood tall. You didn't yell. You didn't fight back. You showed more strength than that officer ever could. Remember that." Marcus nodded slowly. He wanted to believe his father's words, but deep inside, the sting of humiliation still burned. He didn't just feel hurt. He felt exposed. The image of the crowd staring, recording, whispering, those memories replayed over and over in his mind. That night, Daniel sat alone in his study, the room filled with files, books, and framed photographs from his long career. On the desk lay a thick folder marked Internal Affairs, Officer Bradley Knox. He had already filed the report, but it wasn't just paperwork, it was personal. He had spent years climbing the ranks, proving himself through honesty and hard work, and now one man's ignorance had stained the badge he had sworn to honor. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. For the first time in years he felt tired, not physically but morally. Being a black man in law enforcement had always been a balancing act. To the public, he was often seen as the symbol of fairness. To some of his own officers, he was a target for resentment. He had expected resistance to his reforms, but not this. Not someone attacking his own son. His wife Linda appeared at the doorway. She had been watching from the hall, her eyes filled with quiet strength. "He's trying to be brave," she said softly. Daniel looked up. "I know. He shouldn't have to be." Linda came closer, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You've always said change takes courage. Maybe this is the moment. Not just for him, for all of you." He nodded slowly. "Tomorrow morning I'm calling a full department meeting. Every officer will hear what happened. No more silence." The next day, the entire precinct gathered in the briefing room. Dozens of uniforms filled the space, some curious, some nervous, some already whispering. Chief Harris walked in with the same calm authority that had earned him respect on the streets and fear among those who hid behind corruption. He placed his hat on the podium and looked around. "Yesterday, an officer of this department struck a child. He used words that disgrace our badge and everything it stands for. That boy was innocent. That boy was also my son." The room fell completely silent. Even those who had doubted his leadership now looked at him with surprise and discomfort. Daniel continued, his voice steady. "Some of you may think this is just one incident. It is not. It is a reflection of something that has been ignored for too long. Prejudice, abuse of authority, a lack of accountability. That ends now." He paused, letting the words sink in. "We cannot protect this city if we do not first protect the people from ourselves. I expect better from every one of you. Because the people expect better from us. From the back, a few younger officers nodded quietly. Others looked away uneasy. But the message was clear. The new chief was not afraid to confront the truth even when it was uncomfortable. After the meeting, several officers approached him privately. Some apologized. Others offered support. A few remained silent, but Daniel knew silence sometimes meant reflection. Meanwhile, Marcus returned to school. Word about the incident had spread faster than he could have imagined. Some students avoided him, unsure what to say. Others treated him like a hero. But Marcus didn't feel like one. He just wanted to be normal again. During lunch, his best friend Jamal sat beside him. "Bro, everyone's talking about what happened. I saw the video. Your dad's a legend, man." Marcus looked down at his tray. "Yeah, but I didn't want to be famous for that." Jamal nodded slowly. "I get it. But maybe it's not about fame. Maybe it's about what it shows people, that we don't have to stay quiet when something's wrong." Those words stuck with Marcus. Later that week, a teacher asked him to speak during the school's morning assembly. At first he refused. He didn't think he had anything important to say. But that night his father encouraged him. "Speak from your heart," Daniel told him. "Sometimes one honest voice can start a conversation that changes everything." The next morning, Marcus stood on the school stage, facing hundreds of faces, some familiar, some not. His hands shook slightly as he gripped the microphone. He took a deep breath and began. "I used to think being strong meant fighting back," he said softly. "But now I know strength can also mean staying calm when the world is against you. That day at the park, I was scared. I was angry. But I remembered something my dad always says. Dignity is your greatest armor. No one can take it unless you give it away." The audience was silent. Even the teachers listened closely. "I don't hate the man who hurt me," Marcus continued. "I just hope one day he realizes that what he did doesn't make him powerful. It makes him small. And I hope everyone here remembers that respect is something we all deserve, no matter what we look like." When he finished, the room erupted in applause. Some students even stood up. Marcus felt his heart lighten for the first time since that terrible day. Maybe his pain could mean something bigger. Maybe it could help others see differently. That afternoon, when he got home, Daniel was waiting for him. "I saw the video of your speech," he said with a proud smile. "You handled it better than most adults would have." Marcus grinned shyly. "I just told the truth," Daniel nodded. "That's what makes it powerful." Later that evening, the chief received a call from City Hall. The mayor himself wanted to meet. The video from the park had gone viral, and so had Marcus's speech. The city was now under national attention, not for scandal, but for a story of accountability and hope. At the meeting the next day, the mayor congratulated him. "Chief Harris, your leadership has turned a painful moment into a symbol of progress. We want to launch a community trust initiative under your guidance." Daniel agreed, knowing it wouldn't erase the past, but it was a start. At home, Marcus overheard his parents talking about it. "So much is changing because of that day," Linda said. Daniel smiled faintly. "Change always begins with pain, but it doesn't have to end there." Marcus looked out the window at the evening sky, thinking about everything that had happened. He realized that sometimes the world tested you in unfair ways, but how you responded defined who you became. And though he didn't know it yet, his journey was only beginning. Because while justice had been served for one officer's mistake, the real challenge, changing hearts, rebuilding trust, and inspiring forgiveness was still ahead. And Marcus Harris, the boy who once stood trembling in a park, was about to become a voice that would echo far beyond his own neighborhood. The days following the park incident felt like a storm that would not end. The video had spread everywhere, on phones, televisions, and social media feeds. Some people were shocked, others angry, and many inspired. For Marcus, it was overwhelming. One moment he was just an ordinary teenager. The next, his name was being spoken by strangers around the country. Everywhere he went, people stared. Some smiled at him with pride. Others whispered softly, pointing him out to friends. "That's the boy from the park," they said. Marcus didn't know how to feel. He was grateful that people cared, but he also wished things could go back to normal. He missed being just Marcus, the boy who liked basketball, math, and his mom's fried chicken on Sundays. At home, the Harris family tried to keep things calm. Linda cooked his favorite meals and made sure to turn off the TV whenever the story came on. But even she could not escape the flood of messages from reporters and activists asking for interviews. One evening, Marcus sat quietly at the dinner table, pushing food around his plate. His father noticed. "You're quiet tonight," Daniel said. Marcus shrugged. "Everyone keeps talking about it, Dad. The videos, the comments, the news. It's like I'm not even a person anymore, just a story people argue about." Daniel set his fork down and leaned forward. "Son, you are not just a story. You are the truth behind it, and the truth always makes people talk." "But it doesn't feel good," Marcus said softly. "Some people online are saying I made it up or that I was acting. They don't even know me." Linda reached across the table and touched his hand. "People fear what they don't understand, baby. But you keep being you. The world will catch up eventually." Daniel nodded. "What matters is what you know, that you told the truth and that you handled yourself with dignity." Marcus looked at his father and tried to smile. "I just wish people would see that this isn't about hating anyone. I don't want the officer's life ruined. I just want people to stop judging others before they know them." Those words struck Daniel deeply. His son had seen more than most adults could handle, yet still spoke with compassion. In that moment, he realized Marcus wasn't just growing stronger, he was growing wiser. That week, Daniel returned to the police headquarters for a city press conference. Cameras lined the hall. Reporters waited eagerly, ready to twist or praise every word. As he stood at the podium, Daniel looked calm but firm. Behind him hung the city seal and a banner that read, "Justice and Unity Through Reform." He began slowly. "I stand before you not just as the chief of police, but as a father. What happened at that park should never have happened, to any child anywhere. Officer Bradley Knox's behavior was unacceptable, and he will face full disciplinary action. But this is not about one officer. This is about changing the culture that allows such moments to exist." A reporter raised her hand. "Chief Harris, has your son recovered emotionally from the incident?" Daniel smiled faintly. "He's healing, but what matters more is that our city begins to heal too. My son's pain should not be wasted, it should be transformed into progress." Another reporter called out, "What steps are you taking to ensure this doesn't happen again?" Daniel nodded. "Starting today, we are launching community training programs, open dialogues between citizens and officers, and mental health support for everyone in the department. Policing must be built on trust, not fear. I will make sure of that." The applause that followed was genuine and long. Cameras flashed. For the first time in months, the city felt like it was turning a corner. Meanwhile, Officer Knox sat at home suspended, staring blankly at the news broadcast of the press conference. His career was hanging by a thread. For the first time, he saw himself from the outside, not as the man enforcing the law, but as the man who had lost control of it. The image of Marcus's face haunted him. He remembered the boy's eyes, confused, frightened, but still calm. That look followed him into every dream, every quiet moment. One evening, his wife placed a hand on his shoulder. "You need to make it right, Brad," she said softly. "Not for your job. For yourself." He looked up slowly. "And how do I do that?" "Start by saying sorry," she whispered. "Not because the world demands it, but because your heart does." Days later, an envelope arrived at the Harris household addressed to Chief Harris. Inside was a handwritten letter from Officer Knox. It read, "Chief Harris, I know there's no excuse for what I did. I acted out of bias, anger, and ignorance. Seeing that boy's eyes, your son's eyes, has haunted me every night since. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I am asking for the chance to make things right. I want to meet him, not as a cop, but as a man who failed and wants to change. Bradley Knox." Daniel read the letter twice, then handed it to Marcus later that evening. Marcus stared at the paper, silent for a long time. "Do you want to meet him?" Daniel asked. Marcus hesitated. "I don't know. I still get angry when I think about that day. But maybe he needs to see that I'm not what he thought I was." Linda looked uneasy. "Are you sure, Marcus? You don't owe him anything." "I know," Marcus said, "but maybe this isn't about owing. Maybe it's about growing." A few days later, the meeting was arranged in the police department's conference room. It was quiet and private, just Marcus, his father, Officer Knox, and a counselor. When Knox walked in, his face looked older, worn down by guilt. He removed his cap and held it against his chest. Marcus sat across from him, nervous but composed. Knox spoke first. "I'm sorry, Marcus. For everything. I was wrong. I saw you and judged you before you even spoke. I thought I was keeping order, but I was just spreading the same fear I was supposed to stop. Marcus didn't say anything at first. He looked at the man who had hurt him, the man who now looked small and broken. After a long pause, he said quietly, "It really hurt, you know. Not just the slap. The words. They made me feel like I didn't belong anywhere." Knox's eyes filled with tears. "You did not deserve that." "No one does." Marcus took a deep breath. "I can't forget it, but I can forgive you. Because if I don't, I'll carry it forever, and I want to carry hope, not hate." Daniel watched silently, his heart swelling with pride. In that moment, he saw something extraordinary, a teenager showing more grace than many grown men. Knox nodded, his voice trembling. "Thank you. You don't know what that means." After the meeting, Marcus and his father walked outside together. The air was cool, the sky painted with streaks of gold. "You handled that with more wisdom than most adults ever will," Daniel said softly. Marcus smiled. "You taught me that power isn't about control, it's about choice." Daniel looked at him and nodded. "And you chose compassion. That's real strength." Over the next few weeks, things began to change. The department launched new training sessions led by community leaders. Schools invited Marcus to speak about his experience, and each time he spoke, his confidence grew. His words were simple, but they carried truth. He would tell students, "I'm not special. I'm just someone who learned that you can't fight darkness with more darkness. You have to be the light even when it's hard." People listened. Videos of his speeches spread online, inspiring thousands. He received letters from other kids who had faced discrimination, thanking him for his courage. Teachers shared his story in classrooms. It became a symbol of empathy and change. One evening, Marcus sat in his room reading a letter from a boy his age who lived across the country. The boy wrote, "I was scared to stand up when I saw my friend getting bullied. But after seeing what you did, I spoke up. It felt good to do the right thing." Marcus smiled, tears in his eyes. For the first time, he truly understood what his father meant about turning pain into purpose. Downstairs, Daniel watched a news report about the city's new community outreach program, one that was already reducing complaints and building trust between officers and residents. It was working, slowly but surely. When Marcus came downstairs, Daniel turned to him. "You see this?" he asked. "This is the ripple effect of one moment. One act of courage can move an entire city." Marcus nodded, leaning against his father's shoulder. "It still hurts sometimes," he admitted quietly. Daniel smiled gently. "That's okay. Scars remind us that we healed, not that we're broken." As the night grew quiet, Marcus looked out the window. The same park where everything had happened was now full of children again, laughing, playing, free. It didn't look like a place of pain anymore. It looked like a place where something new had begun. And for the first time in a long while, Marcus felt peace. Weeks passed, but the city was still buzzing from everything that had happened. The story of the boy at the park had spread far beyond the city limits. News anchors discussed it on national television, newspapers printed editorials about it, and even college students used Marcus's name in classroom debates about justice and change. Yet through all the attention, Marcus tried to stay grounded. He still went to school, helped his mom around the house, and played basketball with his friends in the evenings. But every once in a while, he would feel the weight of all those eyes. People expecting him to be a symbol, a voice, a miracle. It was strange because all he had done was stand his ground and tell the truth. One Friday morning, while walking through the school hallway, Marcus was stopped by his principal, Mrs. Green. She smiled warmly and said, "Marcus, can I have a word?" He nodded, adjusting the strap of his backpack. "I just received a call from the State Youth Council," she said. "They want you to speak at their annual summit next month. Students from all over the state will be there." Marcus blinked, stunned. "Me, but I'm just a student," Mrs. Green smiled. "Yes, and that's exactly why they want you. Because you spoke from the heart, not a script. The world needs more of that." Marcus hesitated, but eventually nodded. "I'll do it." At dinner that night, he told his parents. His mother's eyes filled with pride. "That's my boy," Linda said, laughing softly. "I knew this heart of yours would touch the world someday." Daniel smiled, though there was a seriousness in his expression. "This won't be easy, Marcus. Some people will support you. Others will challenge everything you say. But no matter what, stay true to who you are." Marcus nodded slowly. "I will." In the following weeks, Marcus spent his evenings preparing. He didn't write a fancy speech. He just jotted down thoughts in a notebook about fear, courage, forgiveness, and what it meant to be seen as less than human and still choose to rise above it. He also thought about Officer Knox. Since their meeting, Marcus had received a letter from him every week. Each letter was short but sincere, sharing stories of how he was attending counseling, volunteering at youth centers, and trying to unlearn the prejudice he once carried. One letter said, "I cannot erase what I did, but every day I am trying to build something better. I hope one day I can make someone else feel safe instead of afraid." Marcus didn't always know how to reply, but reading those words gave him hope. It made him believe that people could change, that even darkness could be turned into something good. The day of the summit arrived. The auditorium was huge, filled with more than 2,000 students, teachers, and guests. Bright lights shone on the stage. Marcus stood behind the curtain, his hands slightly trembling. He could hear the murmur of the crowd, a mix of laughter, whispers, and excitement. Then the host's voice echoed through the microphone. "Please welcome our special guest, Mr. Marcus Harris." Applause thundered through the room. Marcus walked to the podium, the sound of his footsteps echoing in his own ears. When he looked up, the lights blinded him for a moment. All he could see were shadows of faces waiting to hear him speak. He took a deep breath. "Hi, everyone. My name is Marcus Harris. Some of you might know me from the news, but I'm not here to talk about what happened to me. I'm here to talk about what happened after." The room quieted instantly. That day at the park, I felt powerless. I felt small. I thought I would never forget the shame. But then I learned something important. Being small doesn't mean being weak. Standing alone doesn't mean being invisible. Sometimes it's when you have nothing that you find who you truly are. He paused, letting his words settle. I also learned that anger can destroy you if you let it. Forgiving someone doesn't mean you accept what they did. It means you choose peace over poison. The crowd listened closely, many nodding, some wiping their eyes. Marcus smiled faintly. "I don't see myself as a victim. I see myself as someone who was given a chance to remind people that respect, empathy, and fairness aren't just words, they're choices we make every single day." When he finished, the entire hall rose to its feet. The applause was long and loud, echoing off the walls. Some students shouted his name. Others simply clapped with tears streaming down their faces. Afterward, as he stepped off the stage, several young people approached him. One girl said quietly, "Thank you, Marcus. I've been scared to speak up about the way I'm treated at school, but after hearing you, I think I can." Marcus smiled warmly. "You can, and when you do, you won't be alone." Meanwhile, back in the city, Chief Harris was busy leading the most important reform project of his career. The department now had weekly training programs focused on empathy, cultural understanding, and community service. Officers were required to spend time in neighborhoods, not to patrol but to listen. The changes were not easy. Some officers complained, saying it was unnecessary. Others quit. But Daniel didn't waver. "If you don't believe in serving every citizen, then you don't belong here," he told them. Within months, complaints against the department dropped sharply. Community trust began to grow again. People started greeting officers with nods instead of fear. It was slow progress, but it was real. One afternoon, Daniel received an email from the National Police Association inviting him to speak about his department's transformation. It was a recognition of his leadership, but he knew deep down that the credit belonged just as much to Marcus. He smiled and whispered to himself, "Change begins at home." A few weeks later, Marcus returned from school to find his father waiting on the porch, smiling. "Got a surprise for you," Daniel said. Marcus tilted his head. "What is it?" "Come with me," his father said, leading him to the car. They drove to a quiet neighborhood on the west side of the city, a place Marcus had never been before. When they arrived, Daniel parked near a community center that was under renovation. A sign outside read, "The Harris Youth Center for Hope." Marcus's eyes widened. "Dad, is that?" Daniel nodded. "It's yours, son." "Well, ours. We're starting a program for kids who feel unheard, unseen, or lost. A place where they can talk, learn, and grow." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "You're naming it after me?" Daniel smiled softly. "After what you stood for. You showed people that strength isn't about force, it's about heart. They walked inside. The building smelled of fresh paint. Walls were covered with artwork from local students, murals of peace signs, open hands, and faces of all colors smiling together. Marcus ran his fingers over a plaque near the entrance that read, "Courage begins when silence ends." He turned to his father. "I don't know what to say." Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. "Just promise me one thing. Use this place to give others what you gave me. Hope." Over the next few months, Marcus spent his weekends volunteering at the center. He helped organize reading programs, sports activities, and group talks about self-worth and leadership. Children from all over the city came, some shy, some angry, some broken, but all left feeling a little lighter, a little stronger. One afternoon, as Marcus was helping a young boy with his homework, a familiar face appeared at the door, Officer Knox. He looked different now, calmer, humbler, and dressed in civilian clothes. Marcus stood up. "Officer Knox?" Knox nodded. "I came to volunteer, if that's okay." "I heard about what you're doing here." Marcus smiled softly. "Of course. Everyone's welcome." That day, the two of them worked side by side, handing out sports equipment and helping kids paint murals. The children didn't know their story, and maybe that was for the best. They just saw two people, once divided by anger, now united by purpose. As the sun began to set, Knox looked at Marcus and said quietly, "You saved me from becoming someone I would have hated." "Thank you." Marcus shook his head. "No, you saved yourself. I just gave you the chance." The two shared a quiet handshake that said more than words ever could. Months later, during a citywide youth award ceremony, Marcus was called on stage again. This time it wasn't because of tragedy, but because of what he had built. As he accepted the award, he looked out at the crowd. He saw his parents smiling proudly in the front row, Officer Knox among the volunteers, and hundreds of kids from the youth center cheering. He took the microphone and said, "A year ago I thought my story ended in a park with a slap. But now I know that was just the beginning. We can't change what happens to us, but we can decide what we do with it. We can use our pain to break things or to build something beautiful." The audience rose to their feet, applauding, cheering, and chanting his name. For Marcus, it wasn't about fame anymore. It was about something much deeper, a sense of peace that came from knowing he had turned a moment of injustice into a movement of kindness. As he left the stage, his father wrapped an arm around him and whispered, "I told you, son, change starts when one person refuses to stay silent." Marcus smiled, looking out at the sea of faces glowing under the lights. "Then let's never be silent again." And with that, he knew his story had become something far greater than himself. Fame had found Marcus, but peace had not. It had been almost 6 months since the park incident, yet it still followed him everywhere, on television, in newspapers, even in the whispers of strangers. People smiled when they saw him, took pictures, and told him how brave he was. But every time someone said, "You changed the world," Marcus felt a quiet pressure inside his chest, a feeling that maybe he had to stay perfect now, that there was no room to be just a kid anymore. At home, the house felt different too. Reporters sometimes showed up outside. Letters from schools and organizations arrived daily, asking for Marcus to speak or attend events. His father handled most of them, politely declining. He knew Marcus needed space to breathe. One evening, Marcus sat on the porch with his mom, watching the sky turn orange. She handed him a cup of hot chocolate, her gentle way of saying she knew something was on his mind. "You're quiet again," Linda said softly. Marcus sighed. "I'm just tired, Mom. Everyone keeps saying I'm this symbol of hope, but I'm not sure I even know what that means. I didn't plan any of this." Linda smiled faintly. "Symbols don't plan, baby. They just live honestly, and people see something in that." Marcus looked down at his cup. "But what if I make a mistake? What if I say the wrong thing one day and everyone turns on me?" Linda chuckled lightly. "Then they'll see you're human, and that's what they need to see most." He looked at her, searching her face for answers. "Sometimes I wish things could go back to how they were, before that day." "I know," she said quietly. "But the world needed that day, Marcus. It needed someone to wake it up." He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned against her shoulder, letting the silence say what words could not. The hum of the neighborhood filled the air. Children playing, dogs barking, a distant car radio playing an old song. It all sounded normal, yet Marcus felt like his life could never truly be normal again. At school, things had changed too. Most kids treated him kindly, but some treated him differently. Teachers expected more. Students looked to him during class discussions about fairness and justice, as if he carried all the answers. Even Jamal, his best friend, had started acting strange. During lunch one day, Marcus found Jamal sitting alone at a different table. "Hey," Marcus said, sitting across from him. "You've been quiet lately." Jamal shrugged. "You've been busy, man. Always on the news or talking to people. You're like, famous now." Marcus frowned. "I didn't ask for that." "I know," Jamal said, stabbing at his food with his fork. "It's just weird. You used to be my guy, you know? We'd hang out, play ball. Now it's like you're living in a different world." Marcus's heart sank. "I didn't mean for that to happen." "I miss that too." Jamal looked at him for a moment, then sighed. "Yeah, I know. I guess I just miss my friend, not the public speaker." Those words stayed with Marcus long after lunch ended. He realized that fame could lift you up, but it could also build walls between you and the people you cared about most. That night he texted Jamal and said, "Basketball after school tomorrow?" The reply came almost instantly. "You got it." And just like that, for one afternoon, things felt simple again. Two boys on a cracked neighborhood court, playing until the streetlights came on, laughing until they couldn't breathe. Meanwhile, Chief Harris was fighting his own battles at work. The reforms he had started were working, but not everyone liked them. A few senior officers grumbled behind closed doors, calling him too soft, saying he was letting emotions guide policy. One evening, he returned home later than usual, his shoulders heavy with the weight of leadership. Marcus was waiting for him in the kitchen, still awake. "Long day?" Marcus asked. Daniel nodded, loosening his tie. "You could say that." Marcus poured him some coffee. "You always say change takes courage. Does it ever get easier?" Daniel smiled tiredly. "No, son. But it gets clearer. You start to see who stands with you and who stands against what's right." Marcus thought about that as his father sipped his coffee. "Do you ever get scared, Dad?" The question made Daniel pause. "Every day," he admitted. "But fear isn't the enemy, Marcus. Fear reminds us that what we're doing matters." Marcus nodded slowly. "I think I understand now." Daniel looked at his son, his eyes softening. "You've grown so much this year. You've seen more than most kids your age. But don't forget, you're still allowed to be young. Don't let the world steal that from you." Marcus smiled faintly. "I'll try." A few weeks later, the family was invited to a national television interview. It was supposed to be about the positive impact of the Harris Youth Center and how Marcus's story had inspired police reform. Marcus didn't want to go at first. "What's the point?" he said. "People already know what happened." But his father explained, "Sometimes reminding people is the only way change stays alive." On the day of the interview, the studio lights were bright and the cameras intimidating. The host smiled kindly but asked difficult questions about the incident, the forgiveness, and the ongoing reforms. When asked how he felt about Officer Knox now, Marcus paused before answering. "I think he's trying," he said softly. "And that's all we can ask of anyone, to try. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about freeing yourself from the weight they gave you." The audience went silent for a moment, then broke into applause. Even Daniel blinked back emotion. After the show, Marcus noticed a text on his phone. It was from Knox. "Saw your interview. Thank you for your grace. I'm still learning every day." Marcus smiled faintly and wrote back, "Keep going. Change takes time, but with attention came exhaustion." By the end of the month, Marcus started feeling distant, drained. The endless interviews, the school expectations, the constant reminders, it was too much. One night he sat alone in his room, staring at the ceiling. The walls were covered in letters from children thanking him, newspaper clippings about his father's reforms, and a poster from the youth center opening day. Yet somehow, the more he looked at them, the emptier he felt. He missed the quiet. He missed being invisible. His mother found him sitting by the window later that night. "Can't sleep?" she asked. He shook his head. "Sometimes I feel like I don't know who I am anymore. Everyone keeps telling me I'm strong, brave, special. But what if I'm just tired?" Linda knelt beside him, her voice soft and steady. "You are allowed to be tired. You're allowed to rest. Being strong doesn't mean never feeling weak. It means not letting weakness define you." Marcus turned to her, his eyes glistening. Do you ever think I'll just be Marcus again? Not the boy from the park? She smiled sadly. Maybe not. But that's not a bad thing. You've become something bigger than that moment. You've become a reminder that pain can lead to purpose. That's something people need right now. He nodded slowly, feeling her words settle deep inside him. The next weekend, Marcus woke up early and walked to the park, the same park where everything had started. The morning air was cool, and the trees swayed gently in the wind. The playground had been renovated, the benches freshly painted. Children laughed as they played, their joy echoing through the air. He stood near the spot where it had all happened. For a moment, he could almost hear the echoes of that awful day. The shouting, the slap, the silence. But then as he looked around, he realized something had changed. The fear was gone. A little boy ran past him, tripping and dropping his toy. Marcus bent down and picked it up. "Here you go," he said with a smile. The boy grinned. "Thanks," and ran off again. Marcus stood there, smiling faintly. Maybe this was what healing looked like. Not forgetting, but transforming. As he turned to leave, he noticed his father walking toward him, hands in his pockets. "Couldn't sleep either?" Daniel asked, smiling. Marcus chuckled. "Just needed to see this place again." Daniel nodded. "It looks different now." "Yeah," Marcus said quietly. "Feels different too." They stood there for a while side by side, watching the park come alive with laughter and sunlight. "Dad?" Marcus said softly. "I think I'm ready to slow down for a bit. Just live like a normal kid again." Daniel smiled. "That's exactly what you should do. The world can wait." As they walked back home together, Marcus felt something lift from his shoulders. For the first time in months, he wasn't trying to be a symbol, a hero, or a message. He was just a boy walking beside his father, grateful for another day, grateful for the peace that came after the storm. And deep down, he knew the world would keep remembering even when he stopped trying. Because the strongest stories never end. They just grow quieter with time. Time moved forward like the steady hands of a clock, never pausing, never slowing. The park incident had become part of history. Something studied in classrooms, written about in articles, and remembered in the city's collective memory. For Marcus, though, it was more than history. It was the beginning of who he became. 4 years had passed. Marcus was no longer the 14-year-old boy who had once stood trembling in front of an angry officer. At 18, he stood taller. His voice carried weight, and his eyes revealed both youth and wisdom. He was preparing for college now, his acceptance letter from a top university folded neatly in his backpack. His dream was to study law. He wanted to become a civil rights attorney, someone who could help kids like him who never got the chance to be heard. But despite his growing maturity, Marcus still carried moments of doubt. Fame had cooled with time, but the memory of it had not disappeared. Some days he felt strong, ready to face the world. Other days he still felt the echo of that slap in the park, not on his cheek, but in his soul. One late afternoon, Marcus was sitting in his room scrolling through an email from a scholarship committee. They wanted him to speak at their gala dinner about his journey and his plans for the future. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his forehead. "Why do people always want me to speak?" he muttered under his breath. His father, Daniel, knocked gently on the door before walking in. The years had added silver strands to his hair, but his presence was just as commanding. "Another invitation?" he asked. Marcus nodded. "They want me to give a speech again." Daniel sat down on the edge of the bed. "What's wrong with that?" Marcus sighed. "It feels like everyone wants to hear about the park. About that one day. But I'm more than that day, Dad. I want to be known for what I choose to do, not just for what happened to me." Daniel nodded slowly, his face thoughtful. "I understand. But son, you have to realize people don't just see the pain. They see how you carried it. That's why they want to hear from you. You remind them it's possible to rise after being knocked down." Marcus frowned. "But what if I don't always feel like rising? What if some days I just feel tired? What if I don't want to be strong all the time?" Daniel looked at him with soft eyes. "Then you're human. And being human is enough. Strength doesn't mean never feeling weak. It means choosing to stand up again when you can." Marcus looked down at his hands, silent. Then after a long pause, he whispered, "Sometimes I feel like I'm carrying the whole world's expectations." Daniel leaned forward. "You don't need to carry the world. Just carry yourself, son. That's all that's ever been asked of you." That weekend, the family attended a community event at the Harris Youth Center. The building was full of life. Children laughing in the gymnasium, volunteers handing out food, music playing in the background. Marcus loved this place. It was a reminder that something beautiful had grown out of pain. While walking through the hallways, Marcus spotted a younger boy, no more than 12, sitting alone in a corner with his head down. He walked over and knelt beside him. "Hey, you okay?" Marcus asked. The boy looked up, his eyes red. "They said I don't belong here," he whispered. "Who said that?" Marcus asked gently. "Some kids from school. They told me I was just trouble." "That no one wants me around." Marcus's chest tightened. He saw himself in the boy. The same loneliness, the same doubt. He sat down next to him. "You know something?" Marcus said. "People told me that once too. They looked at me and decided who I was without even knowing me. But they were wrong. And the kids at your school? They're wrong too." The boy wiped his nose. "What did you do when they said that to you?" Marcus smiled softly. "I stood tall. I remembered that their words didn't define me. And I found people who believed in me, like you'll find here." The boy sniffled but nodded slowly. "You think I'll be okay?" "I know you will," Marcus said firmly. "Because you're not alone." As Marcus stood up, he saw his father watching from across the room. Daniel gave him a proud nod as if to say, "This is why your story matters, but not every moment was easy." A week later, while walking home from school, Marcus passed a group of teenagers on the sidewalk. One of them pointed at him and said mockingly, "Hey, it's the park boy. Slapped by a cop, saved by Daddy Chief." The others laughed. Marcus froze. For a split second, anger flared inside him, sharp and hot. He wanted to shout back, to tell them they had no idea who he was or what he had endured. But then he remembered his father's words. "You don't need to carry the world. Just carry yourself." So Marcus kept walking, his shoulders straight, his silence louder than any insult. It hurt, yes, but it also reminded him of something important. Respect wasn't something others gave you. It was something you kept, no matter what. When he got home, he told his mom what had happened. She listened quietly, then said, "You don't need everyone's approval, Marcus. You just need your peace. Don't let them steal it from you." Marcus hugged her tightly. "Thanks, Mom." As graduation approached, the weight of choices pressed on Marcus. College acceptance letters were on the table, scholarships waiting and opportunities rising. But late at night, lying in bed, he wondered if he was ready. Was he strong enough to step into a world bigger than his city, where no one knew him and where his father's presence couldn't shield him? One night, unable to sleep, he walked into his father's study. Daniel was there, reading old case files. "Dad," Marcus said softly, "what if I fail? What if I go out there and I'm not enough?" Daniel looked up slowly, setting the files aside. "Son, failure isn't the end. It's part of the journey. The only way you'd ever be not enough is if you stop trying. And I know you. You'll never stop trying." Marcus sat down across from him. "Do you ever feel like you're failing?" "Even now?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Every day. But every day I also remind myself, progress isn't about perfection. It's about persistence." Marcus nodded slowly. Those words settled deep inside him like a quiet promise. The night of graduation arrived. The auditorium was filled with proud parents, excited students, and the smell of fresh flowers. Marcus walked across the stage in his cap and gown, the applause echoing like thunder. His father and mother stood in the front row, clapping until their hands ached. When Marcus received his diploma, he looked out at the crowd and thought about everything. About the park, the humiliation, the forgiveness, the youth center, the speeches, the doubts, and the hope. He realized then that his story wasn't just about pain. It was about persistence, about finding light even in the darkest corners. Later that night, after the celebrations, Marcus stood on the balcony of their home, looking out at the city lights. His father joined him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've come a long way," Daniel said softly. Marcus smiled. "And there's still a long way to go." Daniel nodded. "Yes, but wherever you go, remember, your worth isn't in what people expect from you. It's in what you choose to give." Marcus looked at him, his eyes steady. "I think I'm ready, Dad. Ready to carry myself into the world." Daniel smiled, his chest swelling with pride. "Then the world better be ready for you." They stood there together, father and son, gazing at the city that had once broken them and then lifted them higher. And in that quiet moment, Marcus knew his journey was far from over. It was only just beginning. Years passed and the world moved forward, carrying with it the story of a boy in a park who refused to bow his head. That boy was no longer a boy now. At 28, Marcus Harris stood tall in a courtroom, his black suit crisp, his eyes sharp with determination. The walls of the courthouse echoed with the weight of history. He was no longer the child who had once trembled under an officer's hand. He was now the man standing at the front of the room, defending a teenager who had faced something hauntingly similar to what he once endured. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Marcus said firmly, his voice steady yet full of heart, "this isn't just about one boy. It's about the dignity that belongs to every boy, every girl, every person who has ever been told they don't belong." The jury listened closely, the room hanging on his every word. He wasn't just a lawyer. He was a living story, a reminder of resilience, forgiveness, and justice. When the trial ended and the verdict was delivered in the boy's favor, Marcus walked out of the courthouse surrounded by reporters. Cameras flashed, microphones were pushed toward him, but his answer was always the same. "This isn't about me. It's about making sure no one else carries the same pain I once did. My story was just the beginning, now it's about all of us." That evening, Marcus returned home to the same house where he had grown up. The neighborhood looked different now. New shops, freshly painted homes, children riding bikes along the sidewalks. Yet inside the house, it still smelled of his mother's cooking and echoed with the warmth of family. Linda, older now but still graceful, greeted him with a hug at the door. "You look tired," she said, smiling knowingly. "I am," Marcus admitted, loosening his tie. "But it's a good kind of tired." Daniel Harris, now retired, sat in his armchair reading the newspaper. His hair was whiter, but his presence was no less strong. When Marcus walked in, he lowered the paper and smiled proudly. "Another victory today?" Daniel asked. Marcus nodded. "For a kid who reminded me a lot of myself." Daniel chuckled softly. "The world has a way of circling back, doesn't it?" Marcus sat beside him. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm really making a difference. For every case I win, there are still more kids out there, more families hurting." Daniel placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "You won't save everyone, Marcus, but you'll remind people that saving someone is possible, and sometimes that's enough to keep the world moving." Later that week, Marcus visited the Harris Youth Center for Hope. The building had expanded since its early days. Now it had classrooms, a library, sports fields, and even a counseling wing. Children filled the halls, laughing, studying, and playing. It was alive with possibility. As Marcus walked through, he was greeted with smiles and hugs. Many of the children looked up to him as both a mentor and a role model. He always made time to sit with them, listen to their stories, and remind them they mattered. One boy asked him, "Mr. Harris, were you ever scared like me?" Marcus smiled gently. "Yes, all the time. But being scared doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. What matters is what you do next." The boy's eyes lit up. "So I can still be strong even if I'm afraid?" "Exactly," Marcus said with a smile. "That's when you're strongest." Walking through those halls, Marcus felt a sense of peace. This center was more than a building. It was proof that pain could turn into purpose, that brokenness could lead to beauty. But the journey wasn't without tests. One evening, Marcus received an invitation to a national conference on civil rights. He was asked to deliver the keynote speech. Thousands of leaders, activists, and students from across the country would attend. As he sat at his desk, staring at the invitation, he felt the old weight return, the expectation, the pressure. He thought about the boy in the park, the crowd that had watched, the sting of that moment. He thought about forgiveness, about his father's words, about the years that had shaped him. Finally, he picked up a pen and began to write. The night of the conference arrived. The hall was massive, filled with faces eager to hear him. Marcus stepped onto the stage, his heart steady, his voice clear. "When I was 14 years old," he began, "I was slapped in a park by a man who wore a badge. In that moment, I felt powerless. But what I learned is that power doesn't come from how loud you shout or how hard you hit. It comes from how firmly you stand and how deeply you forgive." The audience leaned in, silent. "I forgave that man, not because he deserved it, but because I deserved peace. And from that day forward, I promised myself that no other child should ever feel less than human, in the eyes of those meant to protect them." Applause began to ripple through the hall. Marcus continued. "My father, the chief of police, taught me something that has stayed with me my whole life. Respect is not given by a title, it's earned by our actions. Today I stand before you not as a symbol, not as a victim, but as a man who believes that change begins when one person refuses to stay silent. The hall erupted in applause, standing ovations echoing like thunder. Marcus stood there, humbled but also hopeful. He knew this moment was not the end. It was a bridge to the future. After the conference, Marcus stepped outside into the night air. He looked up at the stars, his mind quiet. His phone buzzed with messages of praise, but he put it away. Instead, he thought about his father, his mother Jamal, the boy in the youth center, and all the children who would come after him. He whispered softly to himself, "The fight is never over." But neither is the hope. Back at home, Daniel and Linda watched the speech replay on television. Daniel leaned back, tears in his eyes. "That boy," he said quietly. "He's everything we dreamed he would be." Linda smiled, holding his hand. "He's more. He's everything the world needed him to be."